We all know and love Apple, the tech giant that has given us some of the most innovative products of our generation, but did you know that Apple has had its own fair share of scandals? Apple has been in the news a lot lately, and only sometimes for the right reasons, but from their negative involvement in the environment to their labor practices, there's no shortage of controversy surrounding the tech giant. It seems like Apple is always getting into some sort of trouble these days. In this video, we'll look at some of the biggest scandals that have hit Apple in recent years. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about some of the most shocking scandals that have ever happened to Apple. Welcome to the Lightning Rod channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos. Apple Inc. is a multinational corporation headquartered in Cupertino, California that develops and sells consumer electronics, including desktop and laptop computers, smartphones, tablets, accessories, and software. In 1975, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne started the company in Cupertino, California in Jobs' parents' garage. Apple is now the most valuable firm in the world and the largest information technology company by revenue. Over 1.4 billion Apple products are in use today, making them one of the most widely adopted brands in the world. They've got a solid grip on the popular tech product industry, from smartphones and tablets to watches and laptops. Despite its accomplishments, though, the corporation has been struggled by its share of scandals. Today, we'll tell you the most significant scandals in the history of Apple that you never knew about before. Apple's Batterygate scandal. To get started, let's talk about Batterygate. The term Batterygate is commonly used to refer to Apple's practice of intentionally slowing down the processor on its phones in order to keep devices with poor batteries from shutting down under high load. This dispute was initially brought to light before the end of the year 2016. According to user reports, an iOS update had caused some iPhone models to shut down when their battery reached 30% capacity randomly. Let's check out the timeline of the events. At the beginning of 2016, Apple began to address reliability concerns with older iPhones, such as unexpected shutdowns. Apple claimed at the year's end of 2016 that this problem only affected a small number of its customers' phones, but in fact, it was considerably more widespread. Earlier that year, Apple launched iOS 10.2.1, which modified power delivery for all iOS devices newer than the iPhone 6. Apple eventually issued a public statement at the end of 2016 claiming that it had reportedly slowed down the processing power of the CPU because of aging batteries, which resulted in a large public outcry, with many individuals launching lawsuits against the company. To regain consumer favor in 2018, Apple promoted cheap battery swaps for the iPhone 6 and later generations. Next, Apple introduced iOS 11.3, which included battery health transparency. Consumers who paid for an out-of-warranty battery replacement for an iPhone 6 or earlier handset in 2017 ended up receiving a $50 reimbursement from Apple as damage control and to prevent the situation from getting worse. After this, Apple argued to federal judges that they had paid the price and should be freed from guilt in this case. Apple achieved a $500 million settlement with a class action lawsuit launched on behalf of iPhone customers. It doesn't matter how much Apple tried to hide the matter, but an organization as popular as them will never be able to hide from the public's eye. The battery scandal was one of the worst and most expensive issues any company has ever been through. Apple accused of child labor practices. While Batterygate was bad, it's nothing compared to Apple's worst scandal to date, which involved accusations of using child labor. Many kids risk their health and safety daily by working in risky fields for Apple and handling potentially harmful tools. As more and more people learned about the negative effects of child labor, a growing chorus of voices called for a ban on the practice. One of Apple's largest suppliers, Foxconn, frequently hired children as young as 14 at its factories in Yantai, China. Foxconn has been criticized by NGOs for failing to verify its employees' identities and for employing minors under China's legal working age of 16. In 2016, Apple discovered many instances of its suppliers employing underage labor. The Shenzhen assembly factories in China were experiencing a high suicide rate among workers. Apple products were manufactured there. These incidents prompted some to doubt Apple's commitment to human decency in its dealing with its workforce and other key stakeholders. As a result, Apple Inc.'s credibility and the trust of its stakeholders were in danger. The unethical and poor management practices of Apple Inc. affected and involved a wide range of stakeholders. Apple stakeholders included kids, workers, shareholders, consumers, government, NGOs, suppliers, and media. Therefore, Apple's poor management affected all of these parties. Employees were vulnerable to Apple's policies and may be overworked. Child labor is a major problem that can have far-reaching consequences for a business and its constituents. Apple has long been condemned for the labor abuses of its suppliers, primarily in China, but increasingly in other nations, including India, where workers at an iPhone manufacturing rioted after accusing management of withholding their wages. Apple also discontinued connections with Pegatron, its second biggest iPhone maker, after it learned that it had broken labor regulations by employing student employees who were performing tasks unrelated to their studies. Apple accused of worker violations in Chinese factories owned by Foxconn. If we talk about the workers' violations, Foxconn, which is the largest supplier for Apple, is always at the front of the headlines. This is another one of the biggest scandals against Apple, and this one began with the report issued by the nonprofit advocacy organization China Labor Watch, alleging that Apple and its manufacturing partner Foxconn violated a number of Chinese labor laws, such as withholding incentive payments, reducing safety training, and hiring more temporary employees than is permitted by law. The research was based on the undercover investigators' observations and the records they obtained while working at the largest iPhone plant in China, located in Zhengzhou. According to the organization, one of the investigators had worked at Apple for a period of 4 years. According to research by China Labor Watch, 50% of the workforce in August 2019 consisted of temporary or dispatch workers. Chinese legislation limits the percentage of a company's employees that can consist of dispatchers to 10%. There's been a significant rise in the number of dispatchers since 2016, according to China Labor Watch. According to the article, Apple and Foxconn boosted those numbers to compensate for the damage caused by the trade war between the United States and China. Thus, the following allegations were made against Apple and Foxconn. The average Chinese worker puts in 100 hours of overtime each month, far more than the 36 hours allowed by Chinese law. College employees were forced to put in extra hours during the peak period. Workers at the facility complained that they were often exposed to dangerous chemicals but were not provided with proper safety gear. The factory didn't report work injuries. Apple has been criticized for the working conditions in its factories in the past, so the company now produces an annual analysis of the treatment of people in its facilities in a report called the Supplier Responsibility Report. The research from China Labor Watch indicated that the Chinese government was partly to blame for failing to address labor issues. Apple CEO Tim Cook was urged to exert pressure on Chinese suppliers to comply with Chinese labor rules, whether or not they're really enforced.